Welcome to NeverTheLess podcast with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show dedicated to organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Today, you would learn how to discover your essence and live more powerfully.
Hello and welcome to the NeverTheLess show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. My name is Adeshawa Greg Igodaro, and with me in the studio is Bidemi.
Hello everyone, welcome to NeverTheLess, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. We are in the Pursuit series, and this is our third episode in that series.
Absolutely. We have looked at 2 episodes in this series. We've looked at the definition of pursuit and the importance of defining what pursuit is to you. We have also looked at what is worth pursuing. A lot of people are pursuing things, and BM has spoken about how every one of us is actually pursuing something. But are we pursuing God's predetermined goal for us? And so in this episode, we're going to be looking at how we pursue. If you remember, we had said that pursuit is not speed, and it is also not slacking behind. So what exactly, or how exactly do we pursue if we say that we're not, Paul says we're in a race, but you know, the pace of the race. How do we make sure that we're pursuing and we're pursuing right?
Okay, so this whole episode is supposed to be about how to rest in pursuit. So make sure that as you're pursuing, you understand who you are, whose you are, and how it is that you are pursuing. Yes? So how do we pursue? The answer is we pursue from rest. Let's begin from the place of rest. And when you think about rest, you think about inactivity. If I'm supposed to be actively in pursuit, how do I rest when I'm actively in pursuit? And that's why the code will be trying to crack today. How do you rest and yet pursue? Because if rest is the pillar for pursuing well, then it must mean that rest, we're not defining rest properly. So for this particular episode, in defining rest is not inactivity. Rest is a capacity to do, but with a place where you are anchored on God Himself. Right. So this episode is built around Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 1, the last 3 verses, somewhere there, the Bible says that God, when He had created, looked at all that He had created, and He saw that it was very good. In chapter 2, it says that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day He rested. And from that point on, He started to talk about how God got man ready for manifestation. And what you'll find is that the first man who manifested met a God who was at rest. God was not in the thick of activity when man manifested. So it's like, if we would just, I don't know if that's how it happened, but when I think about it, the picture I see is that man opened his eyes and he saw God at peace. He saw God at rest. And my take is that is the first thing God modeled for man, so that man will understand that everything else that man will pursue from that point on, he has to do it from the place of rest. Because a lot of us pull our hair in pursuit. We are so pressured in pursuit that we begin to make mistakes. I learned very early on my journey as a person that when I'm under pressure, I make mistakes. If I allow pressure to get to me, I make mistakes. So in my pressure moments, I do my best to be the calmest. Because even though in those moments I'm asking myself, what am I going to do? I have mastered trust in God to be able to get in pressure moments and not pursue out of desperation. Every time a man is not at rest and he's in pursuit, I think that mistakes, the odds, the chances of making mistakes are higher. That's why we must pursue from the place of rest.
Wow. So rest is not, I don't have anything to do.
No.
Because if I have to pursue something, I feel like I have to do something. So for somebody who is saying, but I already have a lot going on, how do I come back to the place of rest? And I know that trust in God is one very key thing. In fact, that's That should be the anchor on which our lives is based on. So for somebody who is thinking, oh, I'm hearing this in the month of March, how do I then make sure that whatever I am doing and whatever I am pursuing with God predetermined goal for me, it is not from a place of agitation and pressure?
Okay, so let's take 2 steps back. Why do we pursue? We pursue because God is predetermined for us to pursue, right?
Yes.
What is worth pursuing? Only the things that will bring glory to God ultimately are worth pursuing.
Right.
That already tells me, because I'm going to give you 5 things and I'm not going to give them all at once. I'll discuss them one after the other. That already presupposes that the reason why we're in pursuit is because God is in control.
Right.
It's because God is in control. I think that man does his best work in rest. And again, I'll go to the Bible to prove it to you. Adam had never seen an animal before. But in the place of rest, his very first assignment was name these animals. And Adam called each animal a name that God did not refute. I have a feeling that I know that when I'm at rest, I tend to hear God's heart faster, or a lot more clearer. So in the place of that rest, I can hear what God is saying. I can see what he's saying. I can do what he's saying simply because I can see God in that moment. Do you understand it? But when we allow the noise, which is what a lack of rest brings, when you allow the noise to come between you, the channels get clogged. That's my experience. And because of that, because you are not at rest, you can't hear clearly. And because you can't hear clearly, you are prone to higher the tendency to make mistakes are higher, and there are many other things that you find yourself struggling with. So point number 1, remember that God is in charge. I know this doesn't sound like something that you can use in a business, but I promise you, if your business is going to go belly up, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And so when you begin to see that, oh, maybe you're not making enough profit, you've done all the strategizing, you've employed all the best hands you know how to, and it just looks like something isn't cooperating. If you're a son of God, step back and say, Lord, you are in charge now. Whatever you are trying to do in this season, I want you to do it. It takes a lot, but it is important. Do not forget, you couldn't have called yourself.
Right.
You found yourself here because God manifested you on this trajectory to make this pursuit that you are on. So he's in charge. Your best bet is to make your recourse to him. Go back to him and say, Lord, it was working 2 minutes ago, it's not working now. If you forget that he's in charge, you will get in trouble. So how do we pursue? Number 1, pursue knowing that God is in charge.
Love that.
The song says he's got the whole world in his hands. It's not just a nursery rhyme or a Sunday school song that we were taught as children. It is the truth. He has the presidents of the world. Look at what just happened in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I saw someone did a post. It said since my child was born, we have had 4 prime ministers and 3 prime ministers and something chancellors. I can't remember the details. And then he ends it up by saying, my baby is 4 months.
Wow.
Yes, he said, yes, we've had 3 prime ministers, 2 royals, that's a king and a queen, and then his county also has had like 3 whatever, and this child is 4 months. The point I'm making is, as smart as we are, we cannot don't have it.
We're not in control.
We're not in charge. So you need to know that God is in charge, therefore he has control. And unless you take that, you'll not be able to walk out of rest or pursue in rest.
Wow.
So let's begin from that.
So for control freaks, that's, you just messed with you just messed with something. Because if I'm used to, you know how people are just used to, this is how I get things done, this is how it works for me, this is a disruption.
It is. That's why I said in pursuit there's a destruction every step of the way. And so if you're a control freak, which by the way I can be, so it's not, I'm not talking to you because I'm a very mellow person, but I've learned over the years as the let's say recovering control freak, that when I find myself in that place, then I remind myself, which is your next step, to trust him. I remind myself to trust him. He's in charge. He has control. Therefore, I trust him. So so again, the way I picture Adam naming those animals was when they brought the elephant, he leaned back, his spiritual ear to God's heart. And he says, Lord, what do we call this? God whispers in his spirit, oh, this is an elephant. And then he verbalizes it. It's the only way Adam that could not, in 5 minutes that God moved away, he ate what he shouldn't eat. It had to be that he was leaning to God's voice to hear what God was saying, to be able to name the animals. So that takes trust to determine that what I hear is from God. A lot of us pursue and struggle with pursuit because we don't trust that God speaks to us. So there is a place for I trust him, and whatever he says is what it is in this step, at this step, and in this moment. So for recovering or yet to recover control freaks, I'm a recovering control freak. I can tell you, number one, he's in charge, therefore he has control. Step number 2, trust him. What's the worst that can happen if you trust him? Wow. When I started, I used to say to myself, at least if he fails, it's because I trusted you. You failed, not me. Because the mindset of the control freak, the reason why we are always on our toes is we do not want to be the ones that failed. Yes? So I just rolled it over to God. I said, you are in charge, you have control, I trust you. If it fails now, you are the one that failed, not me. Not ideal in conversations with God, yes. But thank God he has a sense of humor. I could almost hear him laughing the first time I did that. He said, oh, at least you are trying to trust me. That works.
Right.
So for me, that's the second step. Trust him. Trust him. Trust him. And a picture forms in my mind when I think about trusting God. Many years ago, we saw, I don't know whether it was simulated or whether it was real, but we saw like an earthquake was happening. There was a video that was making the rounds in that time. It looked like an earthquake was happening, and there was this little boy standing on his own at the center of the field. And all around him, it looked like the world was shaking. Everything was going bad. But he was standing there, and he wasn't pulling at anything. He was just standing. When I think about trusting God, that's what I see. The world around me is going crazy, but I'm standing still because I know that greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. I know that the one with whom I have to do has all of this covered. He didn't wake up that day and suddenly realize that there was going to be an earthquake.
Right.
The Bible says from the beginning of time, he knew that thing was going to happen. And yet he left me in the middle of the field. He had to have a plan. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So you cannot pursue in rest unless, number one, you understand that God is in charge and he has control, and number 2, you cannot do that unless you trust him.
And just from that, I'm able to pick that you need partnership with God to pursue anything. If we choose, for example, if we don't prioritize the partnership that we have with God, or that we must commit ourselves to with God, then we will come to that place where we're pursuing outside of what God has actually parametered for us.
Yes.
Wow.
And when we're talking about partnership, it means that you have a relationship that you do your best to continue to nurture so that it grows. The depth of our relationship determines the capacity, the altitude of our trust in him. And so you want to do the work of making sure that your relationship with him is flawless. Fluid and flawless, so that when you say I trust him, you are not at the back of your mind wondering, is he even listening to me? Because you are you are confident that he's listening to you in that moment. Yes.
Wow. We're going to go on a short break now, and BMM is going to come share with us the other things that we must do to pursue properly. We've talked about trusting God, and we've talked about rest. And I believe that as you're listening and as you're watching, you're finding something very useful for your journey in this time. We'll be right back.
See you later.
In a world filled with many fears and discouragement, life often becomes a burden. For those who know the way, life is just simple. Do not worry, you're not alone on this life's journey, as Bidemi Mark-Mordi shares powerful insights and principles from her everyday work and life experiences in her book, NeverTheLess. NeverTheLess is a book designed to encourage and equip you to face life with courage, hope, and determination. Get a copy of NeverTheLess and other books written by Bidemi Mark-Mordi, like The Wisdom of the Seed, Honor, The Theology of Work, and so much more from a bookstore nearby, or call 080-905-63555, or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com to place your order. I guarantee you will make it, nevertheless.
Welcome back to the NeverTheLess show. My name is Adeshawa Greg Godaro, and I'm here with BMM. BMM has been telling and showing us how to pursue or how to rest in pursuit. And you can almost think that if I'm pursuing something on my journey in destiny, I should actually be going at a certain pace. And the first thing she says is, you can only first rest in pursuit. And it actually reminds me of when you spoke about discernment. You have to be in a place of rest,
yes,
to be able to hear.
Discern, yes.
Yeah, and I also like how you talked about, if you're going to really pursue well, partnership is about the relationship, your relationship with God. So it means that if I'm struggling in the place of pursuit,
you may have moved in the place of relationship.
I might have moved. How did they say? Gone out of track.
Yes.
And then I need to retrace and come back.
Yes.
Wow. So, Bidemi, you said there were, I think, 5 things.
Yes,
or 4 things.
5 things.
Okay, so what is the third thing?
So our third way to pursue in rest is to submit to his leading. Someone will say, how's this different? It is different in that every step of the way God will speak to you. Every step of the way God will speak to you. Recently, I was maybe as recent as a couple of weeks ago, I was right in the middle of something, and I was in pursuit of something, and I felt like something had gone out of sync, and my natural or my fleshy response was, oh, disappointment. And God said to me, I heard him immediately, and he said, no disappointments here, only new experiences.
Wow.
And that just flipped it for me. So even though that thing still agitates me, let me not lie, every time I think about it and the agitation wants to begin to build, I actually begin to say to myself, no disappointments here, only new experiences. No disappointments here, only new experiences. By that word, he led me out of a funk, something that potentially could have locked me down for days or months or weeks. Do you understand it? So when I say submit to his leading, I am saying that it may not make sense to you, but if it makes sense to God, then you ought to listen to it. Again, of course, the relationship is critical to be able to do that. Do you see it? So it is submitting to his leading. So the moment he said that to me, I turned around from everything that I could have been my reaction or my response in the moment, which usually is not good. It usually, if I were in that kind of place, it would take a shutdown. It would take, and then sometimes you can extend for like 1 year, and then I'm trying to find my way back out of this hole. But the moment he framed it for me like that, I realized to myself, okay, you can either decide that this is disappointment, or you can decide that God is bringing you to a brand new experience.
And you step
of
into
course,
it.
It made sense to me that just because it looks like it didn't work does not mean that God has shut it down.
Right.
So I started to say thank you for new experiences. But that was his leading. Only his spirit could have gotten me into that space. Because by myself, I'd already seen red. And everything was saying not good, not good, not good, not good. And with each one not good I heard, I was, my energy levels were dropping and they were depleting, and I was feeling, oh my God, another time, another this, another that. But the moment I heard that, it picked me up. The leading of God is powerful. If I had someone to show you, it will be Gideon. I have to ask Gideon, if I see him in heaven, how he woke up that day and led 300 men to war against 140 something thousand. That guy had to be in rest. He had to have trusted God. He had to have recognized that with his dealings with God in that time, that what? God is the boss of me. He's in charge and he has control. I trust him given his track record. So if he says to me, 300 men would do it, 300 men have to do it. Because I would have put the 300 men in front, and I'll put like another 100, the remaining 30,000 in somewhere to say back up,
get ready,
because get ready. When I blow the whistle, just show up. But he actually dismissed them. It can only take rest in God for that to happen.
Wow.
And guess what? He exactly delivered on his pursuit. Exactly how God said he would deliver on his pursuit was how he delivered on his pursuit. So number 3, yes, submit to his leading. Let him lead you. I have found that it makes sense and it is profitable to actually spend 6 months trying to hear God's leading, to execute for 3 hours, than to spend 6 hours executing on the strength of three hours listening. Do you get that?
Yes.
So it is important. Submit to his leading. Now, some people will say, I don't know how God leads. Think about it again. If you've done all that you know how to do and it still didn't work, what other whistle do you want us to blow for you to know that God is leading in another direction?
Right.
I'm from Africa, so we talk a lot about the witches. No, I keep telling you, the witches are not that sophisticated. These days where we're spending cryptocurrency, no, they don't understand it. That can be the reason why you are not able to move forward. Sometimes God by himself will say, come back to me. Come back to me. Just be with me first. And then I will relaunch you, or I will launch you. So follow his leading. I have done work at some point in my career. God said, shut it down. And I shut it down.
Right.
And I moved away from it. Everybody was like, you have built for so many years.
How do you
do this? This cannot be God. God will never ask us. I said, you have no clue. This is exactly God. Because in that season of my life, perhaps what God wanted to see, will I let him? Am I going to leave it to him? Or have I become the God and the one in charge and in control? So submit to his leading. That is important.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And just from sharing about submission to God's leading, what I'm seeing is that God's leading gives you the right perspective in pursuit.
Yes.
And that's why you can feel disappointment but hear new experiences and then embrace what is possible even if you're not sure about it.
Yes.
So even if the disruption happens, like you said, that for every pursuit there will always be a point in time where you'll be disrupted. So even if the disruption happens, because of the perspective that you have gotten from God by his leadership, and again I need to ask, do we need to, for somebody who might be wondering, how do we give God leadership? Is it an intentional thing? Is it a permission thing? Do I vocalize it?
I think it's all of them rolled into one. It begins by, again, forging a relationship, and you forge that relationship by giving your life to Christ, yes? And then you learn if you allow yourself to be discipled by those who have gone ahead of you, you will learn how God speaks, and then you will know the dynamics of how to relate with him. And then there is the place of, yes, I must give him permission, because even if he stood and he said, go left, and you say, I don't want to go left, you have free moral agency. He's not going to force you. So the permission aspect is part of it as well.
Right.
So it's all of these things rolled into one to be able to get to that place where you submit to his leading.
Amazing. The leading of God is the one thing we do not want to toil with on this journey, so that we're not pursuing the wrong thing, depleting in energy, and just messing the whole thing up when it could, even if it doesn't make sense to us. I like how you said that it makes sense to God and we can do this.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the next thing?
Number 4, no comparison. If you're leading or if you're in pursuit by rest, you cannot compare. You cannot compare. Now this is it's critical, but it's also very dicey, because in an age where everything is on social media, people have an idea what you ate the last 6 times, because everything is photographed and you put on social media, and you are not a chef. It's not like you're cooking it, neither do you run a restaurant.
Right.
You just in your house, you want to eat. All of us need to know what you have just eaten or what you are about to consume. It is becoming increasingly hard not to compare, but comparison will be the death of anyone who wants to pursue with God. So no comparison. It doesn't matter whether your house is bigger than mine. It doesn't matter whether my car is larger than yours. It doesn't matter whether you speak better English than I speak. It doesn't matter whether you have more followers than I have. No comparison. The Bible says it like this. It says, set your face as a flint. That is, be so focused that you do not see what's happening in the surround. I think that even in that case of that analogy that I gave of the video of the young boy, it's because he was focused on something else that he couldn't see, or it did not register in his spirit that the ground around him is giving way. So comparison, we should step away from it. If you want to pursue in rest, no comparison. It doesn't matter whether you made $50,000 and I made $5,000. There is no need to compare. We may look like we're on the same race, but I promise you we are not. And even if it looks like we're on the same race in that we do the same exact thing, our paces are different.
Right.
And the bottom line or the scorecard differs from one person to the other person. If you take away from the treadmill, take yourself away from the treadmill of comparison, you will find that your pursuit is seamless. So how do I do that? I do that by saying thank you to God. I'll thank God for 1 and I'll thank him for 2. I'll thank him for 10 and I'll come back and thank him for 1. I know that there is nothing that I am able to achieve that he hasn't brought me to. So if today he decides that it's 20 he would let me achieve, then I should be grateful for 20. And if the next day he decides 2,000 I should be grateful for 2,000. I had to learn to thank God for the things I especially do not like. I had to learn to thank him for them. I had to learn to say to him, thank you. I had to learn to say to him, thank you. I had to learn to say, and every time I get in that space, the darkness that seems to want to encroach because of comparison begins to give way. Because if you don't make room for it, it will have nowhere to stay and take root in your heart.
Right. Wow. So for somebody who is struggling, because I think that comparison is very subtle. I think that when some people say, I don't want to compare myself, they just find themselves there. And then, of course, comparison sometimes then leads to jealousy and then envy. Yes, and I know that I've heard you speak about this and how you have dealt with it at some point. And I want you to please just help somebody to deal with the same thing.
Okay, so I said to you gratitude. Gratitude is really good. The experience I had was with my younger sister, who had lived with me, got a job from my house and went on to live her life. And within a year or 2 of her getting a job, she decides to buy a car. and she calls me and says, I want to buy a car. And I said, what car do you want? She says, I like the kind of car you drive. So we found the car for her. She sent the money through us. We paid for the car. Her car was blue, mine was green, until the car arrived in my house. And I started to think to myself, her own has alloy wheels and mine doesn't have alloy wheels.
Right. And
from that, her steering wheel is wrapped up in leather and mine had fabric.
Wow.
Her seats are leather, my seats are fabric. And you would be amazed that out of those little things, I got to the point that I started to think, she's my younger sister. Does she deserve to ride this kind of car? Thank God for the Spirit of God, because he quickly just said to me, what you should be grateful for is that you were able to raise this one and she's gone on to succeed. And the moment he flipped it for me like that, that's why I said gratitude is critical. Because like you said, it creeps up on you. I love my sister to be so, I would never have sat down to plan this whole nonsense. But it crept up. And the truth is, everything I pointed at was there. It was a fact. It's not that these things were not, but that's not what I should have been looking at. So that's why, that's how I dealt with it. And from that point on, I have learned to just step away from anything that makes me begin to compare with another person. I give myself a reason why it is okay where I am in this moment. So please don't give room for comparison, and you'll find that you are able to make it.
Amazing. So what's the next one?
The final one is only do your best.
Wow.
Only do your best. It's like comparison, but it's slightly different. In that rather than use someone else as your measuring stick, use yourself as your measuring stick. Only do your best. Only do your best. And when I say only do your best, you need to understand that if you can only afford 2 bottles of water, that's your best. God will judge you by your best and nothing more.
Right.
If God did not put 100,000 in your account, God cannot judge you because you did not give 100,000. Because what's in your account determines what you are able to give, isn't it?
Yes.
So only do your best. Only do your best. Only do your best. How I'm able to go to bed with myself every day is, Bidemi, did you do everything that you could have done? Yes, I woke up at 2:30 a.m. like I'm supposed to wake up. At 3 a.m. I was out of my bed. I was able to do this. At 4 a.m. I was seated in this place. At 5 a.m. I ran the prayer call. Between 5 and 9 or 10 or whatever, when I'm not going out, I was still seated there. I was either studying or I was preparing a next class. Lord, everything I could have done until I didn't have energy to do it anymore, or until it was time for me to rest, I did. So if I know that I've done my best, it really doesn't matter who else has run ahead of me.
Wow.
I am fine. So only do your best. If you want to pursue in rest, know that God is in charge. Trust him, submit to his leading, no comparison, and only do your best.
It's been an amazing conversation. I mean, how did we even start start talking about rest in pursuit and landed here? The crux of all of this is your relationship with God matters. Key.
Yes,
is key. You cannot get to the place where you understand that God is in charge if you have not even seen that he is in charge of your life.
Yes.
You cannot submit to his leadership. You cannot trust him. You cannot even not compare. Because just getting to that point, you also had a perspective shift again. And so all of this is summed up in have your relationship with God intact. If you veered off the track, please find your way back. The Master, the Father is calling, he's waiting to give you an embrace. And it reminds me of the prodigal son.
Yes. Well, but we don't have time for that, do we? So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Nevertheless with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Next week we'll come back, still in the Pursuit series, with another angle. Thank you and God bless you. Remember, if you discover purpose, you would live powerful. And that takes an embracing of your superpower. We'll see you next week. From me, Bidemi Mark-Mordi. Peace and out.
Thank you for listening to Nevertheless. For more information and resources, call 080-90563-555. Don't forget, discovering your purpose helps you live more powerfully.